There is a moment in every engineer's career when the thing that made you successful becomes the same thing that limits you. For me, that moment came when I stopped being responsible for the code and became responsible for the people that actually write the code. Not 5 engineers, not 10, over 80 engineers across multiple teams, spanning multiple businesses, multiple countries, varying products. And let me tell you something that most engineers don't expect at that level. Leadership at that scale has almost nothing to do with coding. It actually has everything to do with trust, with systems, and your emotional stability, your emotional maturity. That is what is required. So today, I want to walk you through the transition for me from writing code to leading leaders. I'm going to talk about why most engineers struggle with this shift. When I joined Venture Garden Group, the scale was different. This was not a small engineering team. We were building payment infrastructures, fintech platforms, government systems, aviation systems, large-scale enterprise platforms. Various products like payment gateways, VGPay, lending platforms, Advancedly, enterprise system used across Africa. Engineering teams spread across multiple competencies, multiple companies, multiple subsidiaries, multiple, investors. And suddenly, instead of thinking about function and classes, about one particular project or the other, I had to think about engineering organization. At some point, I looked at the structure and I realized something that is very uncomfortable. That if I personally reviewed every decision, I will slow down Venture Garden Group. The organization will slow down. Let me take you back to where I started leading. If I look back carefully, my transition to leadership didn't start when I began leading large teams. It actually started much earlier. I remember at Sweet Networks. I remember serving as the deputy head of billing and applications. Technically, that was already a leadership role. But then I had responsibility for systems, for people, and even for delivery. But there was one important detail at that company. I was still very hands-on. Very hands-on. I was still deeply involved in day-to-day coding. I was still solving problems directly. I was still debugging systems myself. Still stepping in whenever something complex appeared. And at the time, that felt like the right thing to do. Because as engineers, we are trained to believe that the fastest path to solving a problem is to solve it ourselves. Get into the weed. Do it your own way. And when you have the technical ability to do that, it becomes an habit. But that habit, most of the time, creates subtle trap for engineers because you start becoming the center of the systems. You start becoming the rallying point for everyone. Things move faster when you are involved. But they also depend on you, meaning they cannot run without you. You see, at Sweet Networks, that model was still working for me because the team was smaller, the systems were manageable, but it planted an important lesson, which I didn't fully understand yet then. Leadership, while staying deeply hands-on, works only to a certain scale. At some scale, it doesn't work any longer. Eventually, I realized it. Something very uncomfortable in that team. The team wasn't becoming faster without me. They were becoming dependent on me. Because whenever something complex appeared, the instinct was simple: get Samuel. And when the leader becomes the fastest path to solving problems, the team stops becoming the system. You, the leader, becomes the system. That may work at small scale, but when the teams grow, it collapses. So let me ask you, have you ever worked in a team where one engineer knew everything? That engineer may be brilliant, but the team becomes fragile. Then came cyberspace. This is where the transition really started. I began leading teams more formally. Now the number of engineers increased. The systems became more complex, and something became obvious very quickly. I could no longer be involved in everything. Even though my instincts still pushed me to try sometimes, I was still reviewing heavily. I stepped in frequently. I solved problems directly when I could. And initially, it looked like productivity. I was enjoying it. But something began to happen. Something subtle, not so much noise. Many of times, engineers are waiting for my input. Decisions are slowing down because I have not contributed. Then I realized something very important. The moment a leader becomes the fastest path to solving problems, the team stops becoming the systems. That leader becomes the system. And that was what I realized in Swiss Networks. That was becoming my realization again. Very uncomfortable realization. And I look at myself. Because it meant that very behavior that makes me stand out in other things, while at Swiss Networks, while at other places, is now becoming a barrier, a bottleneck for my team in becoming effective. That same behavior that makes me an effective engineer is not a bottleneck as a leader. One of the major systems we built while I was in cyberspace was the company's first payment gateway. You know, payment systems are serious. Payment gateways are about money. They handle money. You must have trust because you want people to build trust in your system. Security is very important. And there is a lot of bank integrations, external bank integrations, transaction integrity. Earlier in my career, I would have written most of that systems myself. I would have taken the ownership and do it. But this time, it was a deliberate action, a deliberate decision. I designed the architecture. I would. I led the team. I would lead the team. But I would not write the code. Not even a single line of the code. So instead, I focused on system boundaries, architecture, transaction checkpoints, failure scenarios, recovery strategies, documentations, actual decision records. Once those actual decision records were clear, the engineers know what to do. They built the system. And when they finished building the system and we launched the gateway successfully, something powerful happened within the engineers, to their psyche. They didn't feel like they had implemented the system I architected, I designed. They felt like they had built their own system. They owned it. You see, ownership transforms engineers. Ownership creates stronger team. Ownership builds better engineering culture. One of the hardest leadership lessons is learning to trust engineers' thinking. There were times when engineers will propose solutions that were different from what I would have chosen. At those times, my instincts most of the time is intervene. Correct them quickly. But what I did, I began to hold back. And you know what happened? Many times the results surprised me. Not because the solution matched my word for word, no, but because it worked. So many times it even worked better. That was when I was forced to accept something important in my career. Leadership is not about making everyone think like me. Leadership is not about making everyone think like you. It's about building systems where good decisions emerge and emerge constantly. Building systems where good decisions emerge consistently. Then I moved to Venture Garden Group after that incident some months later, and the scale at this time has multiplied. The product lines are many, the teams are many. I was leading head of engineering, so multiple head of engineering. Eventually, my responsibility cut across 80 plus engineers. At that scale, something is undeniable. Heroes don't scale. Control doesn't scale. Hands-on leadership doesn't work so well. It stops working. The organization doesn't need your code anymore. It needs your clarity, your system thinking, your ability to destroy structures where good decisions happen without you being present. And that's when the real shift finally happened for me. I stopped trying to be the fastest problem solver and started focusing on building systems that solves problems consistently. I'm there, I'm not there. Engineers can continue to move on and move ahead. The transition from writing code to leading engineering teams is not about abandoning engineering. It's about changing where your leverage lives. As an engineer, your leverage is code. But as a leader, your leverage is the people, the systems, and your decision quality. As a leader, that is where your leverage lives. You need to stop optimizing functions. No, that's not your business any longer. You need to start optimizing the organizations. And when that shift finally clicks for you, your impact multiplies, it quadruples. Not because you are doing more, but because many more people are able to do their best work because of the structure you created. There was a moment at Venture Garden Group that really crystallized this decision for me, this transition, for me. At that point, I was already responsible for multiple engineering teams, like I've said. The scale I've grown, dozens of engineers, multiple systems, multiple delivery streams, here and there. And one day, during a discussion about a challenging technical issue, about a concern about the output of some engineers, a business manager said something interesting, very interesting. He said, "Samuel, why don't you go deep into the code and solve it yourself so the team can see how good a coder you are?" Now, that suggestion, it wasn't malicious. In many organizations, that's actually will work. It's even seen as a strong leadership. The idea that the leader proves technical authority by jumping into the code, by fixing the hardest problem, by showing everyone, I can still do it. And to be clear, I could. I have spent years writing complex systems. Going deep into the code would not have been difficult for me, but I refused. Not because I didn't want to code. I thought about it. I considered it. Because I didn't want to be the kind of leader that he was looking for. The moment a leader becomes the hero who saves the system, something dangerous happens. The organization learns the wrong lesson. The organization learns the progress depends on their leader. And when that's happened, scale collapses. Instead of the team becoming stronger, the team will become dependent. So I made a deliberate decision. So I make a very deliberate decision because I didn't want to build that kind of a culture. So instead of jumping to the code, I did something different. I went into a troubleshooting session with the engineers. Sit down together. We broke down the problem together. We walked through what I would call maybe the 3 W's of the problem. What exactly is failing? And where in the system is it failing? And why is the system behaving that way? We try to clarify those three things. And once we do, the path became obvious. I handed it back to the engineers. They implemented the solutions. That was deliberate. Because my role was no longer to prove to a business manager or to anyone that I could code. But my role was not to impress anyone, but to build excellent systems where engineers could solve problems without the leader becoming a bottleneck or the bottleneck. That moment taught me something important, and it has always been part of me everywhere I go. Leadership maturity is not proving you are the smartest person in the room. Leadership maturity is resisting the temptation to even prove it. After all, when I later joined the current company where I work, Elekta, I ended up delivering an entire gateway system for a major global medical QA solution. Yeah, I did. I single-handedly handled the architecture, the designs, every documentation around that, the AD house, and contributed more than 50% of the implementation. And even took responsibility for many things, the risk areas. My technical ability was never the issue. But the real question was always this: where should I, as a leader, put my leverage? Where should my leverage sit? Should it sit in writing code or in building systems that allow many engineers to succeed? That decision is what is important for a leader. It changes everything. The hardest things engineers must let go of is control. Yes, control. When you are an engineer, your identity, who you are, is tied to the code you wrote, your code, your solutions, your technical decisions. You are the people person or the person people come to when things break. You fix it. Yeah, you ship code. You ship solutions. You solve problems quickly, even. But when you become head of engineering, you become a leader, your job changes. You are no longer responsible for solving immediate code problems. No. You are now responsible for creating an environment where problems are solved without you. That shift, I tell you, is painful. Because suddenly, you are not the hero anymore. Yeah. The system is, not you. The system now is the hero. Yes. Let me say something that may sound very uncomfortable. If your engineering organization collapses, when you take 2 weeks off, you're not leading. You are carrying the system on your shoulders. And carrying the systems on your shoulder does not scale. Leadership begins the moment the system works without you. You know, in many African and early stage tech companies, engineering success most of the time comes from heroics. One engineer saves production. Another engineer patches something overnight. Someone else works till 3 a.m. to fix things. And people celebrate this. But heroics are dangerous. Because heroics are unpredictable. Systems are predictable. So when I started leading large teams, one thing became clear to me. We needed engineering standards, architecture governance, clear ownership, release discipline, incident management structures. Not because engineers were bad, but because at scale demands structure. Heroics solves today's problems. System solves the next 100 problems. The problems of tomorrow. Very important. When you lead 80 plus engineers, you are not managing tasks anymore. You are managing leaders, engineering managers, enterprise architects, senior enterprise architects, senior engineering managers, tech leads, architects, principal engineers, Your success is no longer measured by how much work did I do. No. Your success by then is measured by how well are the leaders reporting to you performing. That means your work becomes hiring great leaders, coaching great leaders, resolving conflicts between leaders, aligning technical direction among leaders, and sometimes making decisions that affect the entire team. Not code. Not code. Teams. I remember one situation clearly. Two senior engineering leaders agreed on architectural direction. Both very strong engineers, sincerely. Both confident of what they are saying. Both convinced they were right, really. And the discussion was getting heated. Nobody's giving in for or the other. Now, many technical leaders try to solve this by taking side or choosing a side. But that's bad leadership. Leadership at that level requires something different. You step back. You ask questions. What problem are we actually solving? What constraint matters most in solving these problems? What is the scale? Have you considered security? What time to market do we have? You know, once all of these constraints become clear, the answer will become obvious. That's what I did. And once the answer becomes obvious, the engineers aligned. Not because I forced a decision, no, I didn't do that. But because the system I've created clarified the decision for them, and they were able to reach a conclusion. The biggest transition I experienced was not technical. It was emotional. As an engineer, your value comes from being right and right always. But as a leader, your value does not come from being right. It comes from creating alignment across teams. Sometimes that means letting others get the credit. Yes, and you look like you are not contributing anything. Sometimes that means allowing a team to try their approach. Yeah. Sometimes that means remaining calm when discussion gets intense. Because when you lead leaders, when you lead others, emotions spread quickly. If you escalate emotionally, that organization will become unstable. But if you remain structured, the system stabilizes on the shoulder of your structure. Leadership maturity is not about controlling people. It's about controlling your own reaction to what people will do. The biggest mistake engineers make when moving into leadership is trying to remain the best engineer in the room. Because leadership requires a different mindset. Your job is no longer to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to build a room full of smart people who trust each other. Because that is what allows organizations to scale, when they trust each other and they work together. Let me leave you with this. Engineering success comes from solving problems. But engineering leadership, their success comes from building systems that solves problems. And that transition from engineer to lead to architect to principal and then to leadership, to becoming a leader, is it's one of the hardest journey in technology. But if you make that shift successfully, you stop scaling your effort and you start scaling people. If you're an engineer thinking about leadership or already leading teams and looking at how to scale, subscribe to this channel. Because on this channel, we talk about engineering leadership, global tech careers, remote authority, and the hidden rules of leadership in tech.